Here's how we learn about the glaciers. Here's what it takes to get out there and see what's happening in our world. And this is what's happening to the glaciers. We're looking for the change in the terminus position. Our challenge today is getting across the river to see if we can get to the true terminus. We don't every year, but we try every year. And last year we were able to get across it on a snow bridge. This year I'm not sure. Stream's too big. It's got, the upper Curtis and the lower Curtis Glacier draining out in this one stream, so, and pretty steep, slick slope. There's no fording it. You just get swept off your feet. Ever since I was little, I loved snow, which is what got me into glaciers. But it was really, it's really the snow and the skiing that is I enjoy the most. So I try and ski every day in the winter, either cross country or alpine. It doesn't matter which. I think because it's the most important environmental topic that is going to be facing us during your lifetime, that it needs to have a little more scope, and you need to have a little understanding of it. Normally, climate would cycle up and down. What we're seeing is more of a kind of a climbing a stairway. It goes up, levels off, goes up, levels off, instead of up and down. Notice if climate really wasn't warming up, you'd expect the same number of record lows as record highs. To November 1st, this year has been the warmest year we've ever had. Of the 10 warmest years since the Civil War, you guys have lived through every one of them. So, if you were, a basketball team, that would be kind of, a dynasty of warmth. You keep setting records for warmth. No records for cold, just warmth. When I started the climate project, I really was looking at it as a 50-year project. And it just seemed like 50-year data sets were very rare. It just seemed like there's very few data sets that we could put our finger on that were 50 years old. The motivation behind doing this glacial research year after year, part of it comes from, after a while, you have this commitment, you have this obligation, you feel like, because now you've established this important data set. And so you really have to maintain it, because even 1 year where you don't take the measurements the same way, then it invalidates the continuity of that record. And so there's an obligation there, but you obviously wouldn't do it if you didn't enjoy it as well and see value in it. And so part of the way I run the program tries to keep it fresh for me, and part of that is I bring new people every year. So there's always a couple new faces, and it's their excitement that's really appealing.
I wanted to make a good impression. So I contacted Maury. I said, "Hey Maury, do you need any work done? Can I make some maps for you or something?" So I made a map. I entered it in a contest and got like third place in the contest. It was like not an amazing map or anything, but then the field season was approaching and it was maybe going to have enough crew, maybe not. And then he called and he said, "Hey, actually, if you want to come out and work with us in the field for the season, come on out and chauffeur us around."
So at the end of each day, one thing I include is how many miles we went and how many elevation we gained in vertical feet, kind of the two marks of how hard was your day. And so at the end of each day, I write that down. This field season, we climbed 33,000 vertical feet and we hiked 105 miles.
I had been told, yeah, Maury Pelto is an animal. He's like running up and down the trails all day long. I had never been on glaciers before. I'd never had crampons on before. I'd never used an ice axe before. So I'm like, I don't even know what this means, really. I don't even know how to use an ice axe. Like, yeah, I bought an ice axe. I don't know what to do with it. Because I didn't know what was in store for me.
I go to school out here in south of Rochester in western New York, in a little town, Alfred. But when we work on the glaciers, we're all the way up in the top west corner of the United States in Washington, just up here below the Canadian border.
So I drove up from California, picked him up at the airport, and then we just, went and got supplies, and within like 4 hours when I met them, we were hiking up the trail probably, something like that. Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen many berries of late.
I managed to snag a couple recently.
It's a disappointing return.
Yeah. I got a couple of red ones.
The United States looks at 4 glaciers, the U.S. government, the U.S. Geologic Survey, and one's up near Anchorage, Alaska, another's up closer to Denali National Park, a third is the Columbia Glacier in Alaska that's down by Valdez and the shipping terminal there, and then the last one is the South Cascade. But if you look at just one glacier in each range, it doesn't really tell you a lot. And so the National Academy of Sciences had said, as a high priority, that somebody should go look at glaciers across an entire ice-clad mountain range. I thought, I can do that. So what's the ice-clad mountain range I'm going to look at? And so it made sense that I'd pick some place that had some real value, not just scientific interest. This area, the North Cascades, had scientific and practical importance.
The glaciers we look at are alpine glaciers, and there's 2 types of glaciers. There's the huge ones that I'm sure everyone knows about, and those are like the big sheet ones of an Antarctica or Greenland. I think most people have a general concept of that, just like big block of ice. But most glaciers are alpine glaciers. Those glaciers are perched on top of a mountain. That snow builds up year after year after year and builds you ice that just stays there and moves down the mountain slope as it keeps growing. And those are the ones you see in Seattle. People just don't know what's right in their back door. It's just really cool, but most people, it's no clue.
I went to a conference in Cambridge in England, and I think it was a year after I started doing this. But it was a remote sensing conference, and I like remote sensing and satellite images, but I really thought I'm not gonna want to compete. Maybe I felt like I couldn't compete with that, and I thought right then I'm gonna be the ground truth guy. I'm gonna be the guy that provides the ground truth for the satellite imagery. My thing was, how can you have a rational water resource management in the North Cascades unless you know how the glaciers are contributing? You know, the hydropower companies were the big water users, and they're regulated in terms of flow. And I offered some information to them, and they really weren't interested because, you know, the more information they had, the more they would be required to act on it. And so ignorance was literally bliss. I mean, I was told that by one of their workers who agreed to come up here and meet with us, and then was told no by her boss. You know, I don't know specifically what they're afraid of, but that's the general rule.
Most of us, we can sort of conceptualize it. We can read about it and think, yeah, glaciers are retreating, but we don't actually know what that means in reality. We haven't seen it. Having actually seen that, that might be a key to continuing on. You know, it's gone 27 years, and it seems like that'd be difficult. But at this point, he's seen it change so much. He's probably immensely curious about what's going to happen next. So we're on the Easton Glacier, right? And the Easton Glacier is a big glacier on Mount Baker. It's a steep hike in, and it's a few miles, you know, it takes us a little while to get in there. What I understand is that the terminus of the Easton Glacier, I think in the 70s, used to be near the parking lot. It was like a half mile from the parking lot. And now you have to hike for miles to get up there, and you go up, up, up. You know, that's a huge amount of ice. It's kind of hard to fathom how much ice was there down in the valley of Sulphur Creek.
And that's where the glacier was in 1990. It was right up to the top of that ridge. And we literally walked along that ridge and then just stepped right onto the glacier on this side. So that gives you the idea of the amount of thinning that's occurred in the last 20 years.
So I knew that it was Maury Pelto, and then his son Ben Pelto and his daughter Jill. And I knew that this was going to be Ben's sixth season and Jill's second season. I think that I had assumed that they were 27 and 22 or 27 and 23 or something like that. But no, 20 and 17.
This is my second year in the North Cascades Glacier Climate Project. And when I'm out there, I kind of help out with like the basic stuff, like just finding the mass balance of the glaciers by like all the little tools we use. And like what I do on my own time is the sketching of little scenes. This is my field sketchbook that I bring to North Cascades. So I just bring this tiny one because it's easier to pack in, and then I also don't have like a ton of time to do big sketches. So this first one I did my first year. I went out in 2009. I also did this one my first year out, and that was like the little point by our camp at like Rainbow Glacier in the evening. And I remember thinking that like little thing, like I took so many photographs of it because I just thought it was like really beautiful. So this is one I worked on like over like 2 years while I was there. I still have like a little bit to do. And it's like the view from when we were up on top of Columbia before the glacier, and you're looking back at Blinka Lake and like the surrounding hills. So it's kind of like more detail, so that's why I haven't even finished it yet. I always like to like kind of flip through it and look back, and it kind of makes you like remember that moment when you were up there and drawing.
She's an addict for inspiration. She doesn't think of it in those terms, but in reality, that is what she's doing. But she also realizes that inspiration doesn't fall in your lap while you're sitting there. You've got to get up and make it happen, and that usually takes some hard work.
If you look at girls her age and what they do, like they whine about going up the stairs, let alone climbing a mountain with a heavy bag and a heavy pack and working on a glacier. So it is pretty cool. I don't usually think of it like that when I'm out there because I kind of expect that of Jill.
There's kind of an understanding when they were old enough, if they wanted to, they could join me to work on the glaciers. And really, probably Ben had always expected to from when he was like 3 years old.
As a little kid growing up, we would be in our living room after my dad came back from the glaciers, and we'd watch on the old slide projector they'd bring home from work his glacier pictures. Like I just imagined him leading these expeditions in like the North Pole or something when I was real little.
I think it's just most impressive that it's kind of something like not even anyone else, like even like the government can organize people to measure the mass balance, but he just goes out there and does it. I think most people just kind of, if it's like a new idea or something like undone, they just kind of think that that's not something they can do, and he doesn't see it that way. So I think that's really cool.
And he's been doing it for the last 27 years, I believe. And so that really gives you a good picture of it. That's not overnight data. That's a real, I mean, there's no bullshitting that.
So think of the accumulation zone as your income for the glacier. So the snow piles up, and your glacier is happy. It's making money. You pass into the melt zone. Right here's the snow line, and now it begins to expend that income that it gained here. These are all its expenditures. And when you get to the terminus, then you've balanced the expenditures, the melting, with the income, the snowfall. Now this year, there's not a very large snow-covered area. And so the glacier is going to lose mass, lose money, so to speak. Whereas if you compare that to this picture, you see a lot of snow cover, huge area of income, small melt zone. The company had a good profit. The glacier had a positive mass balance. I went and invested in a glacier as a business because if we look globally, and in this case, 2008 is the last year reflected in this chart. And what you'll see as a business, we've lost money 19 straight years. So I think at that point, you need a different business plan. So even in what you might call a good year, it's still not a good year for these glaciers. Hey, yeah, right on target. Can you see it or something? Okay, 1.8. So what I like about this spot, you just cross that ridge, you got the Easton Glacier to the left, Deming to the right. This goes to the Nooksack. Town of Bellingham uses that water. Both glaciers are used for their water resources, just for different purposes, each important. With the Easton you can work on, the Deming you can't. Take a look at you know, this isn't a false sighting.
You know, we hike in, set up our base camp, and then the next couple days we go out, spend all day on the glacier. We're hiking. This is what we're doing. We are moving all the time. The pace on the glacier is kind of slow. You know, it's like methodical.
So this is the Rainbow Glacier. Top of the glacier up here, bottom of the glacier. And so each blue dot here represents a place where this summer we were on the glacier and taking a measurement. In other words, we looked like crazy people going around to every one of these places on the glacier. Well, this particular glacier is about 1.5 miles long, and it ends down about 4,500 feet. and up here at the top, it's very close to 7,000 feet. Your width of the glacier up through here is about a half-mile wide. And one of the difficult challenges, of course, is just getting there. So when you get there, we're traversing from off the map. So we swing down right through here, all the way across. And now, of course, we have to descend all the way to the bottom. We have to ascend all the way to the top, and we have to get back to camp. And so all that, with all these measurements, represents 12 hours of tromping around in snow, which after 7 or 8 hours, your feet are soaked and cold. The rest of you may be quite warm, but not your feet. So the whole idea behind probing is to see how deep this year's snowpack is. This year's snowpack is soft, but we'll run into the top of last year's either snowpack or glacier blue ice, and it's going to be hard. Not only can't you get through it, but you can even hear it. As we go down through, it's just a soft snow ice. Each time going down, 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 and then there's the solid clank that you're hitting last year's surface. So this is a 10-foot long probe, so 9 feet, 8 feet, 7 feet, 6 feet, 5.5, 5.3 inches of snow left from last winter right at this spot.
It's like methodical. We're going out and we're taking the probe in the snow, and we're taking 100 paces, and we're taking the probe in the snow, and I'm like, oh man, we all three have to be doing this at the same time? I don't know. That's how I felt some of the time. But it's good also, because then we can talk about what we're seeing, because we're all learning at the same time, right? Learning kind of the geomorphology of glaciers, or the what and how and why glaciers are the way they are.
Yesterday we did the lower rainbow. We really traversed down to the glacier, hit it about 5,200 feet. We're going to do the same thing today. Then we're going to ascend up to 6,000 feet, measuring the snow depth in the crevasses on the upper rainbow. And it's a very remote corner. It's a hard corner to see from anywhere. You certainly can't see it from any trail or any village or road or anything. So the only way to get to see the place we're going is to actually go there. Not many people do. Well, my son Ben has been coming on the glaciers with me for 6 years. And the first year was really important for him. You know, he's at kind of a point in his life where he had kind of low self-esteem. And so it was like it was a real epiphany for him. And so just, it was the challenge of it, I think.
I first visited the glaciers. My first season up there was when I was 14 years old. And so things have changed a lot since then. I mean, not just the glaciers, but for myself. I mean, I'm considerably, I suppose, physically stronger than I was then. But just being able to learn each year I go there, I learn a little more about the glaciers.
And so his role has really changed, and more in that he really understands what we need to get and how to get it.
Every night at camp, Ben would write down the field notes for the day. What we saw, what the trends were, how much elevation we gained, the distance we hiked, you know, all of that every day, writing it down, keeping track of it.
My real goal isn't to be some big-time scientist. It's to be someone who makes a difference in people's lives, like as a teacher or something. I feel like the more privileged situation you have, the more responsibility you have. And I think we've dropped the bar on that big time. Because when I look at the future, it looks fairly bleak to me. I mean, we're not doing much right now. I mean, it wouldn't take too much to really kick things into the right direction, but we just don't seem willing to take that step.
It used to be easier to get down to the terminus. It was a little lower slope, not quite such a spectacular mess of rubble and talus. So right here where we're standing and filming, this is a little Ice Age moraine. So the glacier was this wide, probably like 1880. But obviously 20 years ago it was quite a bit wider up against these boulders. This glacier's pretty steep. And so you have to worry about rock coming out of the end, so we always pay attention to where the rock fall is, so we'll stay away from the immediate side right here. And then if you look under the main toe, you really don't see any ice blocks right now, so it looks pretty stable. But still, it's a cool morning. That's the time to get out here and take a look at the Lower Curtis Glacier. Now, we measured that Serac just a few minutes ago, 50 meters high. Now, a serac is just an ice tower. Really, you just have the crevasses. When you're near the end of the glacier, both walls of the crevasse melt, and it just gets narrower and narrower, more and more precarious. And seracs are hazardous because at some point they get too thin and they collapse. And that's why you don't want to be where we are on a hot, sunny day. But we were just down at the terminus, and we could see the terminus had retreated 120 meters. Since 1984 when we were first down here. Very thick terminus, so it's not going to retreat as fast as some glaciers. You have a lot of ice to melt. Well, one thing that's peculiar and interesting about the Lower Curtis, right in this face, you can see all these annual layers. It does look like, you know, tree rings, and they are. They're annual layers. So all the ice piled up from here to the top of that serac, 75 years worth. When I planned this, it was clear that the government wasn't going to be interested in funding it. It's not sexy is probably the biggest thing. Our government has not liked monitoring programs. They like new discoveries. I think a lot of times in science what people do is they look to what can I do that will bring in the greatest number of dollars, endeavoring to really push the limits of science. And they may get funded for that, but so much money is going to be invested in that in general 3 years and out will be what happens. And you see a lot of 3-year and out programs.
It takes serious work. It takes serious commitment. It's not like, yeah, you just have to be able to take the field work and then you're going to, go out and rest and then you're going to get trucked out and your supplies are going to get flown in, etc. You have to carry in your supplies, you have to carry in your food, all your gear. Your gear gets wet, you're going to be wet.
And a lot of people can get frustrated because when you have this hard, plodding work, then it takes the fun out. The misery wins. You're sweating, the bugs are after you, and guess what? An hour later, it's going to be the same thing. All the runoff coming down through this little channel that we're measuring the discharge of is snowmelt. So we can then determine how much snowmelt is occurring in this entire basin because it's all funneled through this one little channel. And as we measure the snowmelt directly up there with stakes, and then this is also a direct measurement. We have to do it a couple times a day because it's going to vary, but not a lot. Then we'll have the daily discharge due to snowmelt. So you can see this is a pretty decent flow. Every second, every day, all snowmelt, all summer long.
I've learned a lot from my dad, but I still don't know a whole lot, so I'm kind of just like this, like the assistant that like helps out in like probing and stuff. My dad kind of always lets me go off and like while they're working and like draw, so I'm drawing kind of a close-up view of that little point up there. would definitely like if people kind of like saw the kind of experiences you can have when if you like come someplace like this, and just like kind of see that through my art and like maybe have like an interest because of it. I would definitely like to like continue coming up. I would like to continue coming up like most years for a while at least. I don't really know like what will happen like when I get older. I don't know, I feel like there's already like not a lot of like nature left sometimes. Like sometimes I feel that way, and I don't know, just like a lot of cool places like this, you don't want them to like disappear just because people don't like understand. In the east where I live, I don't ever feel like I'm this like out in the wilderness or like just completely like separate from most people.
The scenery is really dramatic. Some of the more dramatic mountains I've been in. Really steep, you know, lush. Honestly, for me, the dangerous parts of like going around the seracs and the crevasses, that's definitely my favorite part of the whole deal. That and the sunsets. Those would probably be my two favorite parts. Is just like testing yourself, and then just like the beauty. And then once the science comes together and worked up, I think that'll be really rewarding also, knowing that, you know, put in the time and the effort and a little bit of suffering, a couple blisters, and get some info.
What's been impressive on this glacier is the retreat from the top. So when we do this profile right up the glacier, there's been more retreat at the top of the glacier than at the bottom. And particularly up toward the skyline. So we'll be going up there shortly, and we'll measure how far it is from there up to the skyline, and I'll be able to tell you how much retreat. Because the first year I was here, I literally put my skis on that ridge and skied just right down the glacier. And now obviously it looks like a difficult climb just to get up to that ridgetop. And so we were up in there last year, and I can see some of the bedrock areas where we were measuring. We were on ice, they're now just bedrock, so the ice is just totally gone. From a pretty decent sized area, you know, I'd say from here about the size of a football field of this glacier has been lost last year right up in that section. You know, you look at it and you say, geez, with all these big glaciers, why do you bother measuring this one? But there are a lot of small glaciers, and it is kind of interesting. I don't think there aren't really any examples in the world where somebody measures the mass balance of a glacier year after year after year until it's gone. Yeah, except for the couple I've done. But so that's the interesting thing, is to watch this glacier just disappear. We're just here recording, you know, the history of these glaciers as it unfolds. But by doing so in person, we understand the details. You can read any day in a newspaper or a magazine about glaciers disappearing, but to be able to understand why, specifically for each glacier, and even be able to forecast which ones are going to disappear with the current climate or some additional warming, etc. That's the powerful tool.
We are the ground truth. We are basically what everybody who's doing these predictions on glacier mass balance. We are the data that they use to validate their models. If their models don't match our data, then their model is worthless. This is the important information to be able to quantify what has happened in the glaciers over the past 27 years and what is going to happen in the future.
Daniels Glacier shows the most dramatic change from last year. You can look across the whole panorama of the glacier, same thing. So it's probably retreated 300 meters upslope across, the whole kilometer width of the glacier. So it looks like about 40% of the glacier has been lost in the last 27 years, and a good percentage, 3 to 5%, was last year. Oh, we just traversed all the way up the Daniels Glacier, and this is called the Lynch Gap right here. And so we're just going to flip right over onto the Lynch Glacier and traverse all the way across it, probing as we go. And we'll proceed all the way to the skyline, and we'll be able to look over at Mount Hinman and the Foss Glacier. And the Foss Glacier is one that we used to visit every year, but now has become so small that it doesn't warrant continued annual assessment. We got to go one at a time down this little short rock slope. I'm just leaving my crampons on just to keep my boots a little drier a little longer. I know they're going to get wet, but if you don't like them or hate being on rock with crampons, feel free to take them off.
As you get more familiar with it, you pick out, what you're looking at, and that helps a lot. Like having been to the Columbia, having been to a few sites of Baker and looking at Glacier Peak from different areas, it brings the whole area into perspective,
Pea Soup Lake which is down here at the bottom of the Lynch Glacier, is special to me because when I first started coming here, it was right when it was being created. In 1978, there was very little water. There was just a little fringe of water on the far side of the lake. Then in 1983 through 85, the glacier that was covering most of the lake kind of broke up. But the lake was still largely filled with glacier icebergs, so you could pretty much walk across the lake still, jumping from iceberg to iceberg. And they were nice and flat, the size of tennis courts. They weren't small little things. And then it all melted in the summer of 1985, pretty much. And certainly by 1987, the glacier was no longer touching the lake. It was a very steep ice cliff up until for the next 7-8 years. There was no way you could go down to the bottom. So you were asking about how much water this glacier yields each year in the summer, if this is going to yield 400 million gallons of water per summer, spread out really over a 100-day period, that's the length of the May melt season, then that's 4 million gallons a day. A small city of 5,000 people tends to utilize something close to 4 million gallons of water a day. It'll be interesting to see some of these glaciers disappearing away, but I'm concerned about what I'll have left to measure in 23 more years. Will I be coming to Mount Daniels? I don't know if there's going to be any glaciers left in 23 years worth studying right here. Climate community has realized that glaciers are a really critical indicator. And we have glaciers in a lot of parts of the world. So it's not like just one spot. You can look at them and you can look around the world. And the indicator needle is pointing to the same thing. And these glaciers, what they matter is water resources, of course. And it can add up to 45% of all the flow into Baker Lake can be coming from glaciers in a dry summer like last summer. So if we lose those glaciers, obviously that's a huge change. You do develop somewhat of a personal attachment to places you go. It doesn't matter whether it's the beach, and then the beach gets washed away or oil on it, whatever, that makes it personal. And so coming into the mountains and watching the mountains change in a way that isn't really for the natural and isn't for the better is a personal thing.